You've been living a lie your entire life. Every morning when you drag yourself out of bed, telling yourself today will be different, you're participating in one of humanity's most dangerous delusions. The self-help industry has sold you a fantasy about discipline that's about as useful as a chocolate teapot. They've convinced you that willpower is some mystical force that descends from the heavens when you're feeling motivated enough. But here's what no one wants to tell you. Discipline isn't about feeling good. It's about winning a war most people don't even know they're fighting. And right now, you're losing badly. If you've ever wondered why you keep breaking promises to yourself, why your goals feel like mirages that disappear the moment you get close, stick around. Because what I'm about to share will either transform how you approach your entire existence, or it'll make you so uncomfortable you'll click away and go back to scrolling through motivational quotes that make you feel better about your mediocrity. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready to stop being a tourist in your own life and start becoming the architect of your destiny. Listen, I need you to forget everything you think you know about self-control. Throw out every productivity hack, every morning routine you've tried and failed at, every vision board gathering dust in your closet. Because the man who understood discipline better than anyone who ever lived wasn't some modern guru with perfect teeth and a six-figure course to sell you. His name was Machiavelli, and he wrote the blueprint for power that rulers have been using for over 500 years. But here's what's fascinating. His insights about governing kingdoms apply perfectly to governing the chaos inside your head. And when you understand this connection, everything changes. See, Machiavelli didn't write pretty motivational speeches. He wrote survival manuals for people who understood that life is a battlefield where the unprepared get slaughtered. He knew something that modern psychology is just starting to figure out. Your mind isn't your friend. It's a territory that needs to be conquered, occupied, and defended every single day. Think about the last time you set a goal that really mattered to you. Maybe it was getting in shape, building a business, learning a skill, or breaking a bad habit. Remember that initial burst of excitement. That feeling like this time would be different. That surge of energy that made you believe you were finally ready to change. Now remember what happened 3 weeks later, when the novelty wore off, when the work got boring, when your brain started whispering sweet excuses about why you deserved a break, why you could start again Monday, why this particular goal wasn't that important anyway. That voice in your head isn't your inner wisdom. It's an occupying army that's been running psychological warfare against your potential for years. And until you recognize it as the enemy it is, you'll keep surrendering territory in a war you don't even realize you're fighting. Machiavelli understood that every leader faces the same fundamental choice. You can either impose order on chaos, or chaos will impose itself on you. There's no neutral ground. There's no Switzerland in the war between who you are and who you could become. Most people treat their minds like a democracy where every thought gets a vote. But democracies are slow, inefficient, and easily corrupted by special interests. Your brain's special interests are comfort, safety, and immediate gratification. And if you let them vote on your future, they'll choose mediocrity every single time. What you need is a dictatorship. A benevolent dictatorship where your highest self makes the decisions and your lower impulses follow orders without debate. Sounds harsh. Good, because harsh is what works. Kind is what keeps you stuck. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think discipline is about motivation. They wait for the right mood, the perfect moment, the ideal circumstances. They treat willpower like a feeling that comes and goes with the weather. But feelings are the worst possible foundation for any important decision. Machiavelli knew that successful princes don't make decisions based on how they feel. They make decisions based on what the situation requires. They act from strategy, not emotion. They build systems that work regardless of their mood, their energy level, or whether Mercury is in retrograde. You want to know why you keep failing? Because you're trying to govern your life like a wishful amateur instead of a strategic professional. You're making the same mistakes that led to the fall of every weak kingdom in history. Let me paint you a picture that might hurt, but it's necessary. Right now, your life is like a medieval city with no walls, no guards, and no weapons. Every enemy impulse can march right in whenever it wants. Procrastination kicks down your front door. Distraction loots your attention. Fear burns your dreams to the ground. And you just stand there, wondering why bad things keep happening to good intentions. The reason discipline feels impossible isn't because you're broken or lazy or lacking some special gene. It's because you're trying to fight a war with the wrong weapons. You're bringing motivational quotes to a gunfight with your own psychology. But what if I told you there was a different way? What if instead of trying to feel your way to success, you could engineer it? What if instead of hoping for the best, you could guarantee the outcome? That's exactly what Machiavelli taught, and it's what we're going to build together. Not some feel-good fantasy about positive thinking, but a real, practical system for winning the only war that truly matters. The war for control of your own life. Now, before we go deeper, I want you to do something that might feel uncomfortable. Look at your life right now with the cold, analytical eye of a military strategist. Not the kind eyes of a friend making excuses for you. Not the hopeful eyes of someone who believes everything will work out eventually. The calculating eyes of someone assessing battlefield conditions. What do you see? Where are your defenses weak? What territories have you already lost to bad habits, fear, or simple neglect? Which enemies have been occupying your mental real estate so long you've forgotten they don't belong there? This isn't about shame. Shame is useless. This is about assessment. An honest assessment is the first requirement for any successful campaign. Machiavelli wrote that a prince who doesn't understand his current position can never improve it. The same applies to you. If you can't see clearly where you are, you'll never get where you want to go. Most people live in a state of comfortable delusion about their own capabilities. They overestimate their willpower and underestimate their weaknesses. They plan their lives based on their best days and then act surprised when they can't maintain that level consistently. But here's what separates winners from wishers. Winners plan for their worst days. They build systems that work when they're tired, stressed, unmotivated, and dealing with the normal chaos of human existence. They don't rely on peak performance. They engineer average performance to be extraordinary. Think about it this way. Would you trust a military unit that only functioned when everyone was feeling great? Would you rely on a business that only turned a profit when market conditions were perfect? Would you live in a house that only stayed standing when the weather was nice? Of course not. Yet that's exactly how most people approach personal discipline. They build their entire strategy around optimal conditions that exist maybe 10% of the time, then wonder why they fail the other 90%. Machiavelli had a term for this kind of thinking. He called it depending on fortune instead of virtue. Fortune is external circumstances. Virtue is internal capability. And the fundamental rule of power is simple. Never depend on what you can't control when you could depend on what you can. You can't control your mood. You can control your schedule. You can't control your motivation. You can control your environment. You can't control how you feel about doing something. You can control whether you do it anyway. This is the shift that changes everything. Stop trying to manage your feelings and start managing your actions. Stop waiting for inspiration and start following systems. Stop hoping for the best and start engineering success. But here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean brutally challenging in a way that will separate the serious from the merely curious. Building real discipline requires you to do something that goes against every instinct modern society has programmed into you. You have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. You have to stop treating discomfort as a problem to be solved and start treating it as information to be processed. You have to reframe pain from something that signals you should stop into something that signals you're growing. Most people experience discomfort and immediately start negotiating with themselves. Maybe I can do this easier way. Maybe I can skip just this once. Maybe I can modify the plan to make it more pleasant. And every negotiation weakens their position for the next battle. Machiavelli would have recognized this pattern immediately. It's exactly how kingdoms fall, not through dramatic defeats, but through a series of small compromises that seem reasonable in the moment but accumulate into complete collapse over time. Here's what I want you to understand at a cellular level. Every time you negotiate with discomfort, you're training your brain that discomfort is something to be avoided rather than something to be mastered. Every time you take the easier path, you're strengthening the neural pathways that lead to weakness rather than strength. But every time you do something difficult when you don't want to do it, you're building what Machiavelli called virtue. Not moral virtue, though that might be a side effect. Practical virtue, the kind of internal strength that allows you to shape your circumstances instead of being shaped by them. This is why most self-help fails. It tries to eliminate discomfort rather than teaching you to dance with it. It promises easy when what you need is effective. It sells comfort when what you need is capability. Real discipline isn't about finding the perfect system that makes everything effortless. It's about building the internal fortitude to execute imperfect systems consistently. It's about becoming the kind of person who does what needs to be done regardless of how they feel about it. And here's the beautiful paradox. Once you stop trying to avoid discomfort and start embracing it as a tool for growth, it becomes less uncomfortable. Not because the tasks get easier, but because you get stronger. Not because the challenges diminish, but because your capacity to handle them expands. Think of it like physical training. The first time you lift weights, everything hurts. But you don't solve that problem by lifting lighter weights forever. You solve it by gradually increasing your capacity to handle heavier loads. Eventually, what once felt impossible becomes routine. The same principle applies to mental training. The first time you force yourself to work when you don't feel like it, it's agonizing. But if you keep doing it, you develop psychological muscle. You build what researchers call emotional regulation, and what Machiavelli called the ability to resist fortune. Now, let me share something with you that might revolutionize how you think about this entire process. Most people approach discipline like they're trying to cure a disease. They see their lack of self-control as a problem to be eliminated rather than a skill to be developed. But discipline isn't the absence of desire for comfort. It's the presence of something stronger than that desire. It's not about killing your human impulses. It's about organizing them under competent leadership. Machiavelli understood this better than almost anyone in history. He didn't try to eliminate human nature. He worked with it. He created systems that accounted for people's weaknesses while amplifying their strengths. He built structures that turned inevitable human flaws into sources of power rather than vulnerability. You can do the same thing with your own psychology. Instead of fighting a war against every impulse you have, you can become a strategic leader who organizes those impulses in service of your larger goals. Here's how this works in practice. Let's say you're trying to build a daily exercise habit. The amateur approach is to rely on motivation and willpower. Feel good about exercise, then do it. The professional approach is to engineer a system that makes exercise more likely to happen than not happen, regardless of how you feel. That might mean laying out your workout clothes the night before, so the friction to start is reduced. It might mean scheduling exercise at a time when your energy is naturally higher. It might mean choosing a form of exercise you actually enjoy rather than something you think you should do. But more importantly, it means understanding that your brain will always try to negotiate you out of doing difficult things, and building specific strategies to outmaneuver those negotiations before they start. This is what Machiavelli called being your own general, not hoping your troops will spontaneously do the right thing, but creating conditions where doing the right thing is the path of least resistance. And here's where most people make a critical error. They think this kind of strategic thinking is manipulative or inauthentic. They believe that real discipline should come from pure willpower, and that using systems or tricks is somehow cheating. This is exactly backwards. Using your intelligence to engineer better outcomes isn't cheating, it's being human. Your brain is a tool, your environment is a tool, your habits are tools. And the most disciplined people in the world are simply better at using these tools than the people who struggle. You wouldn't try to build a house with just your bare hands and then call using a hammer cheating. You wouldn't try to transport yourself across the country using only your legs and then call using a car inauthentic. So why would you try to build discipline using only raw willpower when there are much more effective approaches available? The answer, I think, is that we've been sold a romantic myth about struggle. We've been taught that if change doesn't hurt, it doesn't count. That if success doesn't require suffering, it's not really success. That the harder path is automatically the better path. But Machiavelli knew better. He understood that effectiveness matters more than effort, that winning matters more than appearing virtuous, that results matter more than the story you tell yourself about how those results were achieved. This doesn't mean taking shortcuts or avoiding hard work. It means being smart about your hard work. It means choosing your battles strategically rather than fighting every fight with maximum intensity. It means using your energy efficiently rather than burning it dramatically. Speaking of energy, let's talk about something that might completely change how you approach your daily routine. Most people think about discipline as a finite resource that gets depleted throughout the day. They imagine willpower like a gas tank that starts full in the morning and runs empty by evening. There's some truth to this metaphor, but it's incomplete. Yes, decision-making does consume mental energy. Yes, you have less self-control when you're tired, stressed, or overwhelmed. But there's another factor that's even more important than energy management: identity. Who you believe yourself to be determines what actions feel natural versus what actions feel forced. And this is where the real magic happens, because identity isn't fixed. It's not something you're born with and stuck with forever. It's something you can consciously shape through the patterns of choices you make. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you want to become. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you're casting a vote for your identity as a disciplined person. Every time you choose impulse over discipline, you're casting a vote for your identity as someone who can't be trusted to follow through. And here's the beautiful thing about this process. Once you've cast enough votes for the identity you want, maintaining that identity becomes easier than betraying it. You stop needing motivation to act like a disciplined person because being disciplined is simply who you are. This is what Machiavelli understood about power that most people miss. Real power isn't something you have to fight for every day. Real power comes from building systems and structures that make maintaining power easier than losing it. The same principle applies to personal discipline. Real discipline isn't something you have to force every day. Real discipline comes from building systems and identity structures that make doing the right thing easier than doing the wrong thing. But building this kind of systematic discipline requires you to think like an architect rather than a laborer. Instead of just working harder, you need to work more strategically. Instead of just doing more, you need to do better. And that means understanding something that most people never learn about human psychology. Your conscious mind isn't driving the bus. Your conscious mind thinks it's driving the bus, but most of your behavior is controlled by unconscious patterns, environmental cues, and automatic responses that operate below the level of awareness. This is why willpower fails. You're trying to use your conscious mind to override programming that exists at a much deeper level. It's like trying to change the direction of a river by shouting at it instead of redirecting the channel. But once you understand how this programming works, you can reprogram it. You can set up environmental cues that trigger the behaviors you want. You can create automatic responses that serve your goals instead of sabotaging them. You can build new patterns that operate at the unconscious level where real change happens. This is advanced material, and if you're still with me, it means you're serious about transformation rather than just entertainment. Most people want change to be easy. They want to feel different without doing different. They want new results from old patterns, but you're different. You understand that real change requires real work. Not just physical work, but psychological work. Not just doing new things, but becoming a new person. Not just changing your actions, but changing your identity. And if you're ready for that level of commitment, then you're ready for what comes next. The specific, practical strategies that will turn everything we've discussed from theory into reality. The step-by-step system for building unbreakable discipline that works regardless of your mood, your circumstances, or your history of past failures. Comment below with the phrase, "I choose mastery," if you're ready to stop being a victim of your own inconsistency and start becoming the architect of your own transformation. Because what comes next will separate the committed from the merely interested. The time for theory is over. The time for implementation has begun.